The journey to better started because I needed to go on a journey. By outside measures was super successful, but internally I was not. And I'm hoping that through this I can learn to be a better person and hopefully just to make my portion of the world just a little bit better. I'm Bill Lombardi, your host. Welcome to the journey to better.
All right, everyone. Well, I want to welcome you to the Journey to Better, and I am honored to have Richard Shlofmitz, eventually I'll learn to say it properly, from St. Francis in New York. And I guess to start, Rich, could you just talk a little bit about sort of your story of where did you grow up? Where did you train? How did you end up at St. Francis?
Yeah, okay. Well, first, thanks for having me. Nice to see you. I can't wait to see you again in person. I hope you're coming to see us in June. But anyway, I was born in East New York, Brooklyn, in the projects, which was an interesting place to grow up. I never knew I was poor until I got older, but I had two really great parents. They were immigrants. My mom graduated third grade. My father graduated 11th grade. They worked every day of their life until I became successful, and then we took care of them. But eventually, I decided I wanted to go to college and get out of there. My wife can't figure out how I got into college because my parents couldn't help it. You know, these days you have all kinds of computer things, and you go on the internet and you have all kinds of automated things to help you apply to college. Back then, you had to do it by hand.
Right.
I had no support whatsoever, so she couldn't figure out how I did that. But anyway, I ended up at NYU, and then went to NYU Medical School. And even though prices were different, it took 10 years to pay my loans back after that, working several jobs. I did 4 years of internal medicine, then did 3 years of cardiology at Columbia. When I went to Columbia, JT Bigger was the head of electrophysiology back then, and I went there to do electrophysiology. It was a different sport than it is now.
Yeah.
It's like your career was different. I went to, and I was working in a dog lab and drawing bloods in the middle of the night on dogs. It was not my favorite thing. And angioplasty was a new sport back then. And the director of the cath lab said to me, "Hey, would you like to do angioplasty?" And I said, "Sure, what is it?" And anyway, the rest is history. So I went back to my wife and I said, "Should I do electrophysiology or angioplasty?" So she goes, "Well, describe the two to me." So I said, "Well, and electrophysiology is really interesting." And back then, they were like 3-hour cases with pronestrol drips and quinidine drips, and there were no defibrillators or ablations, nothing like that. And
Yep.
everybody was full time, and those guys made
And you
maybe.
you had those plug-in things on the wall where you had to
Oh, it's
like
great, yeah.
18,000. Yep. Yep.
And you didn't get much radiation, although the cases went on forever. And those guys made like 100,000 a year. And she goes, "Well, tell me about angioplasty." I said, "Well, angioplasty is a new thing, and not many people are doing it. And you probably can make a lot of money, but it's a ton of radiation." And she said, "We have our kids, we're lead." That's
Way to
how I
go,
went.
Linda. Way to go, Linda. I
So that's
love it.
that's how I became an interventional cardiologist. But so I was at Columbia, and my wife's parents, who we were very close with, they were my best friends. They were on Long Island, and we needed help with the kids. I had no money. I had loans to go with my name, and I was working 5 jobs. And we decided we wanted to settle in Long Island, so we moved in with her parents. They were babysitters, my chess player, and they. So we moved in, but we needed to be on Long Island, and there weren't many jobs back then. And I just lucked out. St. Francis was a place that, on Long Island at least, had a reputation that it was a busy place, and it was a place where someone could do intervention. It was really very hard to do it. It was 19 in the mid 80s, and most places were not open to doing
Wow,
angio. Yeah.
I was going to say, this is right in the early days.
Oh yeah. I was the second trained interventionalist on Long Island. And
Okay.
so my wife said, "Well, why don't you call these guys up and see if they want a job?" I go, "Linda, you don't just call people up and say you want to hire me." She goes, "Well, what do you have to lose?" So I called these guys up, and they brought me in and said, "You know what? Actually, JT Bigger gave like the best recommendation he ever gave. It was really lucky. I have to thank him because the guy who hired me, Steve Villano and Larry Reduto, who were big names in Long Island back then, said they never heard of a recommendation from a guy like Bigger, and they knew of him. So that helped me secure the job. But I came home to my wife and I said, I think I have the job. And the good news is the call schedule is really easy. She goes, what is it? I go, the first 5 years I'm on call. So literally for 5 years, it
Wow.
was the three of us. And for 5 years, I was on call myself for the group. 5 years. I mean, talking Saturday.
Wow.
And Bill, these are the days when you did angioplasty,
Yeah.
close your devices, and there were no such thing as radial. Although I did, even though I'm a femoral guy, I did the first radial in St. Francis years ago before it became a natural thing. But anyway, you had to hold your own groins, and 15% of the time in the middle of the night, the arteries were closed and they'd get vasovagal. And, God, we had 007s back then. We sent people to surgery, we sent people to their graves. It was, you'd never get away with what we did then now. No way.
Yeah, it is crazy to think, right? Like like the scrutiny that comes now, it would never happen.
Never had. I remember there's a neighboring hospital called Winthrop, and there was one guy doing angioplasty, and it wasn't like 10 guys doing angioplasty. There was one guy doing angioplasty, and he said, "Hey, Rich, I'm going to Disney with my kids. Could you cover me for emergencies?" I never walked into that hospital. I didn't have admitting privileges. Never saw the place. It was a Friday night. Linda and I were out to dinner, and they called me that someone's having an acute MI. So I go there, and I do an acute MI, never having any privileges. And then
Back in the day, man, the Wild West.
we'd be in jail now for that. Anyway,
Yeah.
so the advantage of working for 5 years in a place where angioplasty was new, you you cover everybody and you never say no, and you
Mhm.
become insanely busy. And that started my practice 5 years, and then I've been doing this now 37 years, a long time.
Wow.
And
Yeah.
I gotta tell you, each year I get busier because, I made the mistake of never saying no.
Yeah. No, I get that. So about 10 years ago, I mean, obviously you made St. Francis into this. I mean, you guys were super high volume, you're super high volume. And maybe I'm getting this wrong, but around 10 years ago, it
10,
seems like
11
you
years
made,
ago.
yeah,
Yeah.
you made this decision to change. Can you talk a little bit about why you did that and what that change meant?
Well, it actually changed my professional life. It's the most, other than my family, it's the most exciting thing that ever happened to me. I remember when got into medical school and I put my white coat on and said Richard Shlofmitz, NYU Medical Center. I mean, the thrill was insane for me. But the last 10 to 15 years is sort of going from a caterpillar to a butterfly in interventional cardiology, for me at least, because it
Mhm.
changed the way I look at things. But I owe it to my son, Evan, who's my partner now. And he was an intern, and he grew up. My kids grew up. If they wanted to see me, they had to come to the hospital to see me. My wife would say, "You can't call dad unless you're bleeding," and I don't mean oozing; I mean actively bleeding. I mean, she raised my kids, but Evan,
Yes.
he's in practice, in intern. He said, "Dad, your volumes are insane. Your outcomes are great. You need to publish something. This is crazy. You should be like getting all this data out there." I go, "I'm too busy to publish anything." So we actually did two studies together. He's a pretty sharp guy, and what he did is it was a time when there was a question of giving heparin as an anticoagulant versus Lovenox. And the hospital, I was head of the cath lab then, and the hospital said, this is costing us too much money. And I was doing 40% of the intervention. So I said, look, I'll just use heparin. I don't have problems with heparin. All the other guys want to use Lovenox, let them do it. Well, Evan looked at it. He goes, Dad, your complication rate is the same as everybody else's. You probably don't need Lovenox. You probably need heparin. This is before the Swedish study. And we
Yep.
published an abstract at TCT. And we had 10,000 patients, 5,000 in each arm, approximately 5,000 each arm, and there's no difference. We showed that was the first thing we published. What Evan didn't tell people, the 5,000 in my arm were all my patients, and the 5,000 in the other arm were all the other doctors. And then we
Yeah.
published we published this other thing on Epi and Plavix and P2Y12. Anyway, we got into that. He goes, you got to go to the next level. So you got to go into multi-center trials. I went to industry, and it's sort of like I don't compare myself to Bill Gates, but you know how Bill Gates, he was in Washington, high school student, really bright guy. Computer time was at difficult thing. He goes to the university in the middle of the night, gets computer time, and all the stars were aligned right. Well, for me, the stars were aligned right. Um, I had someone pushing me. I had a really busy practice. And then there were two technologies that came out about the same time. One was orbital atherectomy, and the other was optical coherence tomography, or OCT. And at the time, I didn't realize that those two things were like, peanut butter and chocolate in a Reese's cup. They really, calcium and imaging to me are like, they go together.
Yeah.
And I got involved in two clinical trials with OCT and orbital atherectomy and realized the power of those two things together. And then, when imaging first came to me with OCT, the guy came to me and said, my rep, who I really trusted and like, he goes, I want you to try this out. And they brought the rep in, Fernando, and
Yep.
he works with me today. And I said, get this guy out of my lab. This is ridiculous. And and I said, I don't need this. For 27 years, I'm doing angiography-based intervention. I go,
I know what I'm doing.
Bill, I never met an interventionalist who had bad results, ever, right?
Me either.
Everyone's
I'm
the biggest,
telling
the best. I
you.
never had, none of my patients have complications. So I was, for 27 years,
I will admit I've had more complications than any interventionalist on
right.
earth.
Well, I've seen them all. I've done over 100,000 procedures, and I can tell you, I've done everything wrong. But back then, I didn't realize that. I didn't realize how bad
Yeah.
I was. And so, they bring in this OCT, and I say, get him out of here. And then my friend, who was a regional rep, said, Rich, what's wrong? Why don't you want to do this? Why don't you want to do it? And I said, the reason is because I don't know what the hell I'm looking at. And I was embarrassed that I didn't know what I was doing. And this guy
Right.
showed me stuff, and it was all foreign language to me. And
Right.
so he goes, do me a favor, spend a weekend with Fernando. And he didn't realize how dumb you were, right? And he's going to dumb it down for you and go through the ABCs for you. We literally
Right.
spent 12 hours on a Saturday and Sunday. And I looked at this stuff and I just, and together, and, everybody takes credit for inventing the wheel. I love doctors who invented everything. When you say, I'm going to be doing shockwave, oh, I invented that. I did it, right? So I didn't invent anything, but what I take pride in, many people were doing it at the same time. But Fernando and I worked together and we did several thousand. And in my hospital, nobody wanted to do imaging at that time. Everyone was throwing tomatoes at me, but we worked on an algorithmic approach to doing intervention. He was educating me, and I was educating him how to be a doctor. And we
Mhm.
realized, hey, when you do with this powerful stuff, you you learn about landing zones and length and size and pre-treating and afterwards getting the right result. And we came up back then, we called it the 7 steps of angioplasty of length, size, core registration, and everybody else came out with their thing afterwards, and I'm sure we all came out at the same time. Nobody invented it. But in our mind, we came out with this algorithmic approach, and I basically mandated to my lab in the hospital, everybody's got to do that. You don't have an option. You want to work here,
Right.
you got to do it the right way. Because after 2 years of doing this, we just really one thing after the other, and it's proved to me to be changing, absolutely changing how I practice as a professional.
Yeah, but you brought up something that I want to, because I think this, as I listen to the imaging problem, right? There's still a huge imaging problem, which
Terrible.
is the real issue is the I don't want anybody to know, right? So how did you overcome that vulnerable? I mean, how did you get vulnerable and say, I'm the great Richard Shlofmitz, but I'm dumb as a post? And I thought I knew how to size things, but I don't know how to size things at all. How did you deal with that? And what advice might you give other people to maybe check their egos and move forward?
Well, I know where I came from, right? So it's easy to be humble. I didn't go, all the guys around me were all Ivy League trained. They were all brilliant, and I remember when I went to Columbia, I was like looked at as a second class citizen. And no one took me seriously until they saw I was good in the cath lab. Sort of like when you play basketball with people, it sort of makes you all equal if you're good, right? So,
Yeah.
but when I was there, I remember my first year in Columbia, I would come home crying because all these guys were so freaking mean to me because I wasn't Ivy League trained. They were all Ivy League trained. So the thing is, I knew where I came from. So even though you might have thought you were great, you knew what you were, and you always want to do better. You're always pushing to be number one. I remember
Okay.
I know this is probably not politically correct for science, but I was doing a live case to TCT. It was during the Eclipse trial. And one of the best moderators out there is Ajay Katane. He's great. He's such a gracious moderator. He makes you feel good. He he brings out everything. And he's sitting there as I'm
Yep.
doing a live orbital atherectomy case. And he said, Rich Shlofmitz is really changing science. He's just advancing science. This Eclipse trial, he's number one. He did all these trials number one. You really advance science. And I said, Ajay, I'm not advanced. I just want to be number one. I don't really care about the science. So I guess it's the drive that you always want to be the best at what you're doing and number one. So how did I change? It was like I realized how inferior I was, you know, and it's self-realization. I could do better.
Wa- was that hard to accept?
No, it was easy. I saw how bad I was. I mean, I realized that, geez, I got a long way to go here. No, and you know what? The other thing is, it made me more confident doing angioplasty because I don't know about you, but to me, when I was doing angioplasty, I was nervous sometimes. You weren't sure you had a great result. Look, I'm taking care of it. I'm a doctor first, and I see my patients afterwards. It's not like patients are referred to me and they disappear. I don't know what happens to them. I get the calls. My wife gets the calls 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. So to me,
For everybody listening, he carries 3 phones. He's not kidding. I've seen him in Europe answering patient phone calls. He is the consummate doctor.
I'm a doctor first, then an interventionalist. But, the thing is, you never knew you had a perfect result and you had complications, people coming back. And this technology made my life easier. It gave me such confidence in doing intervention. I knew when to do it, when not to do it. Um, I knew when I was going to, if I was in trouble or not. So it actually was easy. Once I made that move to learn it, then it was easy because now I realize angioplasty, I can perfect to the best of my ability. I can perfect it with it
Yeah,
takes away the unknown. It takes the mystery.
yeah.
So it made it less fearful. But I give this lecture and I talk about why doctors don't do it. And everyone will give you an answer. And I don't know if we're going over the side track here, but people say, how come people are only 5 to 10% penetration? And the people who do image don't do it right. They don't do it algorithmic. They look to see maybe if they have a dissection at the end. But the reason why people don't image, in my opinion, it's not because there's not data out there. It's not that it takes more time. It doesn't use more contrast, more radiation. It's not more expensive. I have 95% same day discharge. My angiograms take less than the next guy because I image. I know what I'm looking at. There's only one reason why doctors don't image. It's because they're lazy. And I tell a story about my name, Shlofmitz. Well, when we came over from Europe, we're Jewish from Germany. And if you look in a German American dictionary, you can look in that dictionary, German American, our name was Shlofmutze. And in the dictionary, Shlofmutze is somebody who is lazy, can't get out of bed, can't be motivated, and never will amount to anything. And I tell people for 27 years, I was a Shlofmutze, right? And then when
Yep.
imaging came, I became a Shlofmitz, and I realized how my life can change. But in my lab, I have 21 interventionalists, and 5 of us are really independent doing it. But I have 3 full-time imaging docs, not doctors,
Mhm.
techs that we
Yep.
train, and they do the case with every doctor. I could tell you that my other docs wouldn't be doing imaging if someone didn't hand it on a plate to them. And what my imaging person says, it's 27 millimeters to get good landing zone. It's 3.5 proximally, 3.0 distally. Put a 3.0 stent in, you're going to post dilate. It's lipid. You don't have to worry about pre-treatment. And when you're done, you're done. You have no dissection and they're done. That's what a doctor wants. So what we've been doing
Right.
at St. Francis, I have a foundation, is every year I hire a kid out of college with no medical background, and we have them spend time with our imaging team. And I'm building an army of imaging experts, which I'm exporting to hospitals and industry. So if you have any kid who doesn't know what he wants to do, I could give him a job, I'll pay him 50 grand plus benefits, and I guarantee I'll get him a job the year after. And he'll know more than most doctors. So the answer why people don't do imaging is because they're lazy.
Yeah, I will agree with you and also disagree. Is I think the other piece is what you said is they're arrogant.
Yeah.
They
Well,
don't want they don't want to admit they don't know. Um, that being a different aside, talk to me about OPCI. I mean, you went from a nothing to
okay.
now
Yeah.
you're
So,
doing Saturday morning journal clubs. You got
right.
your national meeting. You've
And
hired
we
in a
built
bunch of famous people.
I mean, I got it. I mean, this is maybe arrogant on my part, but I think I have the best faculty in the world in my hospital right now. In structural heart, I have an amazing team. David,
Hey, hey!
I
You don't
tried to
have
get
me, man. Come
I tried
on.
I tried to get you, but across the board, I mean, we've been building up.
We're not done with that discussion.
Right, okay. Well, so this started back when I started doing this, and around 10, 15 years ago, and what happened was, Jeff Moses was in a situation in Colombia where there was an opportunity for him to join me. And
Mhm.
sort of like Jeff Moses got me into the big boys club. We were busy doing things. We were doing multi-center trials, but we were known on Long Island as a great place, but we weren't known outside our own catchment area. So
Right.
Jeff joins me 50-50 in Columbia and St. Francis, which was what created what made St. Francis was Jeff Moses. Because without Jeff Moses, I could have not got to that next level. Jeff
Right.
is incredible. I mean, he let the world know that what we are, but he brought us to another level. And once I brought Jeff in, we started getting credibility, and I was able to attract people like Ziad Ali, Alan Jeremias, David Cohn, Jaffa Khan, my son Evan. I have great people in electrophysiology, heart failure, across the board. Every spoke, and we started building up and up. But how OPCI got started was Jeff Moses and Marty Leon. When we were making the negotiation to come to St. Francis, Marty and Jeff were saying, okay, you're here. What do you want to be, Rich? What do you want St. Francis to be? And I said, I want St. Francis to be famous outside of Long Island. I want to make us an internationally known place. And I remember the restaurant, we're out to dinner, and Marty and Jeff looked at it. He goes, well, you need to have a conference. And you need to have a conference that's different than everyone else's, because we know there are millions of conferences every year, right? And everybody's going to a conference, and after Zoom, there are 10 million conferences. So they said, what's your passion? And I said, my passion is imaging. They go, okay, why don't you make an imaging conference? And that's how that started. So I decided to make an imaging conference in my first year. And the first year, I can't believe I did this. I had no support. I did the grants myself. I did the travel. I did everything myself. It was 100 people, and it was small, but it was successful. And each year, it's just astronomically grown. It's really exciting. And it's this year we're branching out to a lot of different areas. We did cautery surgery with Jaffa Khan. It was first. We had a think tank now, and I'm trying to be different because there are millions of conferences, so we try to be a little different. It's changing over time, but it's exciting.
Mhm. Where do you want it to go?
So I call it the three amigos. I have Jeremias, Ziad Ali, and my son Evan, the three of them. Those, like, I sort of pay the bills, and they have all the creative, intellectual stuff. Um, you know, I I want us to be a leader in innovative technology. I want us to have great medical care, and to me, I want to educate. So to me, teaching people what I know. I'm 69 now, and what can
Yeah,
I do?
I found out Jeff's 75.
Yeah. Yeah, so we have plans for Jeff. We have plans for him, keep him in the business. Someone like Jeff, you don't wanna.
There's a statue going somewhere?
No, he's still, there's so much. He's one of the brightest guys, not just in medicine,
No,
just in life.
no. He's
He
a smart dude.
he really is, but, he's great. Now he sits out and tells us what to do from the window, so he doesn't have to put the lead on, um, so that helps him, but, you know, to me, what I wanna do, I want St. Francis to be known to continue to be a major impact in interventional in cardiology, uh,
Mhm.
but me personally, X amount of years left, I'm gonna be practicing. I wanna teach as many people, fellows or guys who wanna learn what I learned.
And what is it that you wanna share? What have you learned that you wanna share? Is it imaging?
How
Is
to
it
take care of a patient.
calcium amplification, or is it how to take care of a
The whole
patient?
picture, how the picture. When you spend time in my lab with me, you see that I answer the
Yeah.
calls of my patients, I talk to my patients, I take care of my patients. I write my notes, I
Mhm.
write the order. When I do an intervention, I perk, I do the case, I close, I write the orders, I call the doc, and I send the letter out. So, to me, it's how to be the best doctor you can be.
How hard has it been to get there?
It seems like yes, it doesn't seem hard at all, it's natural. I have the best life in the world. I have the best wife and the best life, because without my wife, I wouldn't be.
I will definitely guarantee Linda, if she listens to this, I'm all about Linda. She rules.
She does, but she is the most important. When we got married, I said, I wanna work and build this incredible practice, I want to go out to dinner with you. I want to travel. I don't need kids." And she goes, "Well, I want kids." I go, "Congratulations. You can have them. When they can drink, give me a call." Right? And she basically raised my 3 sons, which are 3 of the nicest human beings you could ever meet. What I could say about my sons, one is nicer than the other. They're best friends. They call my wife 5 times a day. They're just great human beings because of my wife. And she's the best to me. She has, like, 4 sons. I'm the 4th son. But I couldn't do this without her because I wake up at 3:45 in the morning, and I work till 9:30 at night, and we eat dinner out 7 nights a week. She waits for me for dinner every night, and we talk about the family, talk about whatever. Every night we're out to dinner, so every night's a date. Every meeting I go to, I take her. And, I run 6 hospitals administratively. I have a lot of business meetings. I tell them, "My wife, you can be 8 suits there, but my wife's coming. I'll pay the way, but my wife's coming because if it doesn't involve my wife, we could do it in the hospital. But once I leave the hospital, we're together, whether it's business, and we travel everywhere, and we make the best of everything. And we can go to Cleveland for the day. She'll go, we'll be on the plane together. We'll just hang out. So my wife makes it work. That's how so I have a great life with my family. I have a great life with my hospital family. I have the best partners in the world. It's a family here. So it's just, I'm a lucky guy.
All right. Now I'm going to push you a little bit. You're 69. You've
Yep.
got a young son who's a burgeoning interventional cardiologist. How do you pass the torch?
We're different people. So it's, I don't, I can't pass the torch. I mean, he's himself. He's really big into research and speaking, and he's in the pack, busy doing intervention, getting better. But it's a different. He doesn't have. I guess because he grew up in a family where I always said to him, "You can do whatever you want. You don't have to. I want you to enjoy college." He went to the University of Miami with his brothers. They had a boat. They were on the water. They had a great life. Then he said, "I want to be a doctor." He didn't have to do this. He wanted to do it, and it's a different thing.
Hmm.
To me, I have this. I told you the number one drive. I have to be number one, and I gotta
Yeah.
always be busier every year. So he doesn't have the pathology I have. So he's a different person.
Uh, do you do have this drive to be number one, right? But at some point, there comes a point where you can't stay number one,
Yes,
right?
my
John
biggest.
Elway, everybody. So how do
You
you prepare for that at all, or do you just think it's going to happen, or how does
so
that go?
it's fright. Like I take care of a lot of CEOs, I'm sure as you do, and I see them go from like CEOs of major companies, and then eventually they retire, and they're in their 80s and 90s, and I see them, and I've been in practice just about 40 years, so you see a whole natural history of
Right.
people who are at the top, and then they're not at the top, and potentially one of my biggest fears in life is not being relevant. Right now, Alan Jeremias, I don't know if you see this back behind me here? I don't know if you can see
Hmm.
that.
Yep.
You know what that is?
That's Hercules with the weight of the world on him.
It's Atlas.
Atlas. Sorry,
Atlas,
Atlas,
right.
not Hercules.
It's Atlas
Atlas. Yeah.
carrying.
Sorry.
So in this office every day, every single doctor, nurse, they all come in here with their problems, and I have to solve them. I do other contracts. I do this. And Alan Jeremiah said he got that from me. He said, you know, you really carry the weight of the world on your shoulders, but I live for that. You know,
Yeah.
I live to solve it. So when I'm not relevant is my biggest fear. So I'm going to keep on going until I can't keep on going. And the word retirement is not in my vocabulary. And if I physically can do it and mentally do it, I'm never going to stop.
Okay. So can I can I pick at you a little bit just for fun? Because I've had this a little bit with Tierstein, but who tells you're not number one anymore? Who goes to John Elway and say, or Joe Montana or Michael Jordan or even Joe Biden, like you shouldn't be running,
Yeah,
right?
that's
How do you who do you ask that? How do you do that? I'm not saying
no,
I'm not
it's a
trying
good
to
question.
do anything bad here. I just
Right. It's a good question. So I mean,
we're friends. We've done
right.
this a
So
long
I
time.
think it relates to the point when you said, how did you have self-realization that you weren't great and you needed to do better? It's that self-realization. I know interventionally what I could do and what I can't do. So I don't think I could do everything. I know my limits, and that's one of my strengths is I know what I could do, and then I stop and I send it to
Mhm.
someone who do something I can't do. I'm really good at certain things. Other things I haven't perfected or have time to do that technique, and you know what? I can't do everything. So I know my limitations, and I think when, you know, when my judgment's not there, I'm hoping that I'll recognize that, and you don't know until you're there. But it's also the feedback you get from your patients. You know, they may not know all the intricacies, but I know when I see my patients, the the embrace I get is like a high like you can't imagine. No drug can do that for you.
Right. So it's funny. It's come up a couple of times recently. People a, a question of how does faith interact with medicine? So I know you're Jewish by background. I don't know if you're still faithful or not, but does that
I,
play any role in sort of your life and your being a doctor and the way you take care of patients at all?
so I changed my religious beliefs. I'm now a Seventh Day interventionalist.
Got it. End of discussion. Cool. Uh, I'll go a second one. You said you love to be number one, right? And I have opinions about whether competition is good for healthcare and does competition actually lead to compassion for patients and patient outcomes. What is your thought about competition in healthcare and its effect on patient outcomes?
Interesting. You know, so when I say number one, it's just, I want to be number one with my patient first, right? So when I go
Yeah,
out to dinner with my wife on Long
you
Island,
you want to go to bed knowing you've done the best you can
that's
do
what I mean by
for
number one.
the person, and I get that. That's how I take it when you say
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. I know, because when I go out to dinner and a patient comes up to me and says to my wife, "Your husband is unbelievable, blah, 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 blah." I mean, my wife knows I'm going to be happy at dinner that night, right?
Yep.
So that's number one to me, in terms of like I think where you're going is like in terms of science is getting a paper out, getting research done. Is that going to be the best thing for someone? You know, how I get involved in it is like I just go forward and work. So when Ziad says, Rich, we have a study and you need to give me some cases with shockwave with the three different OCT devices so I can show that. Okay, Z, boom, I'll get that for you. So, you know, I'm sort of in the lab just droning out the cases and the research guys are telling me what to do. But I don't know
But
if it answers it.
Uh, uh, no, because I'll even put it this way, right? With the incentive for a lot of people, not implying you, but if you look, the incentive in healthcare is about money and volume, right? You even brought up earlier, like I had to have the most volume. That is ingrained in people,
Right.
and I just wonder, is that actually where we are now with the complexity of the different procedures, the different things that need to be done, and is that driving good M&M, good self-reflection, good innovation, or is that driving bad peer review and potentially some bad behaviors?
Well,
I'm curious on your thoughts.
medicine has always had the problem of all of us potentially doing things for self financial gain. I mean, if you look at a doctor in the old days before you had insurance review, right? A stress test, echo, and when the nuclear stress tests were paying, I think like $1,500 or something. I never do non-invasive, but and I remember one of my friends said to me, "Oh, you should definitely do non-invasive because every husband has a wife, and that's two nucleus, right?" And that's what it's like doing excessive testing, killed
Right.
healthcare because, people were making money on it. What we've done at St. Francis and how I get around that is like, how does everybody work and get along together? On a Friday night at
Hmm.
9 o'clock, Z may be running in to help somebody who has a perf. Jeremiah is doing a CTO with someone. Everybody works together. How is it? We just nice water here that makes everybody work together? The way I did that in terms of building St. Francis is
Because that's not normal New York.
no, it's not. But if you look at every single person, look, you talk to each guy, Jaffa, Zia, all the guys, they get along because at the end of the day, we're all concerned. I don't want a doctor going home and not having enough money to take care of his family. If you have financial pressure with your family, you can't be all you can be at work if you're worried about how you're going to pay your bills. So I created contracts because I do all the contracts where nobody's financially related to anyone else. So doing this, this, and that is completely independent to the other guy. There is no financial competition. So when they're all doing what they're doing, you know, Z, he's sort of like what's that thing? Can you find so and so who's flying around the world? I never know where Zion
Where's
is.
Waldo? Yeah,
That's it.
exactly.
Okay. So I never know where he is, nor do I ask him because I know he's the best at what he does. He's great, and I hired him for that. And Z, do your thing, make us great, make us famous. So I don't keep track of him, but he doesn't have to do anything to make his salary. He does whatever he does. Same with Moses and Jeremiah and David Cohn and Jaffa Khan. They're allowed to do whatever they do to be great, and I leave them alone. So, I think that's saves us from being financially driven to do things.
So we've talked, obviously, you and I, in a lot of ways, have similar backgrounds. Grew up, we earned it, public school guys, no Ivy League training, came out of nowhere. I was in a podunk town with no academic background. Um, but I've sort of, it's not fulfilling me anymore. So if you were advising me, which you get to now, what advice would you want to give me? And I know you care a lot about me and you're a great dude.
I
So,
we've had this conversation. I can solve your problem in 2 seconds. I told you move out here, you know, you know, come out here and you'll have the best life. Anyone who comes there, it's the best. It's cardiology heaven. The restaurants are better on Long Island for your boat, and we're both boaters, and I have a
yeah,
great dock for you. It's amazing places to eat. It's a wonderful place to live, and uh, and the hospital will just make you happy because everybody's happy. There isn't anybody who we work with. You can see each guy has a smile on his face. I could make you happy.
I appreciate that. So, what is your next sort of legacy move? Where do you want to see OPCI as an educational? Like we talked about, right? Imaging's not going where it should be. Calcium out of it. Maybe it's better with shockwave. But in the end, what's your next legacy with OPCI? Is it an imaging meeting? Is it a industry think tank? Is it
So,
a
so
where does it go?
we just, we have Jaffa Khan in structural with electro, which is
Yep.
amazing. I just hired Lawrence Garcia from the Harvard system in peripheral
Okay.
vascular. So, to me, what the impact is like we were just in Detroit. And we had 75% of the cath labs represented there. We had a great show there. It was a day and a half. And what we taught people is every type of imaging device, every company. So we're not married to any company. So we had the three OCT companies that are out. We had all the IVUS. And it was a small little lecture for everybody. And then
Mhm.
everybody spent an hour going from site
Right.
to site. And it was all hands on with equipment. And we were teaching
Right.
doc 75% of the cath labs. And we're going to do that in Nashville. I did it on a small level in San Diego, Scripps. We did it at ACT. We're doing it at ACC in Atlanta again. So to me, us going out, we did it in London with Spratt and Jonathan Hill. So going out
Yep.
and teaching people one to one, I think, is one thing we want to do. But our OPCI, and it's a great question because everybody's talking about imaging now. Like everybody, Sky has their imaging paper, Europe has their imaging paper. This one, everyone. So everybody's doing it. Got it. Even though nobody's doing it,
Yeah.
everyone's talking about it.
Everybody does. I've never met a doctor who doesn't do CTOs.
Right.
Everybody does CTOs.
Everybody does. Right. So the thing, everybody's doing it. So how are we different now? And I said to the guys, we need to be different in order to be relevant. So we're going to be having hands-on peripheral vascular, hands-on electro, and OCT think tank. But I said we need to change because there are just too many conferences where everyone does the same thing. They have the same slides, and how many times can you tell people, the same thing? And at our conference last year, there were no guests. Everybody was faculty. Everybody was like the best of the best, which was
Mhm.
exciting. But for me, I don't have to tell you at these meetings, the most important thing about the meetings is the dinner.
Yeah, unfortunately, I can't put on near the show you do. You just get a boat ride with me for my meeting.
Yeah, that's what you get a boat ride of mine also.
That's true. No, I mean, it is funny as you think about the meetings, right? Everybody, I mean, it's like you give one talk, you get to give the same talk 1,000 times. Um, and same thing. We differentiated with the complications course, and everybody gets to do the same talk twice, and then I'll find somebody else. Or I really like to keep the faculty vibrant.
Right,
Um, but it is interesting is we've had 1,000 talks, 1,000,000 talks. There's 1,000,000 people out there want to help, but it's not moving the needle. And I guess this comes a bit of the self reflection is okay, what we're doing isn't actually, well, first of all, like barely anybody goes to meetings. There's like 9 or 10,000 interventionists in the US. So, and less than 1,000 are getting interventional CME, and half of those are faculty at the meetings. So the question is the self reflection is where's the gap? How do we get to the lunch pail? How do we get to the hospital that we don't know? And I think that's always been the thing for me with CTOs is it's not about who's best. It's how do we get to the people who are afraid or don't want to change. That's why I went down the complications road. I got tired of giving the same. Here's how to do atherectomy. Here's how to do an IVUS. It's like okay, forget it. Let's talk about all the bad things because that's what you're scared of.
and your complication, meeting is actually one of the most exciting ones because, everybody is showing everything that could go wrong, so you wanna see it so you can learn what to do when it happened.
Right. Not everybody's you and seen everything that's gone
Yeah,
wrong.
but I mean, I don't know if you were at the lecture I gave one year where it was a complication and it was supposed to be
Oh,
complications of OCT.
this is the air ambulance, right? Oh, that's still like the talk. Everybody was there. That's the best talk ever given.
It was
Go ahead, tell the story. You got to tell the
yeah,
story now.
no,
Everybody
it's like,
wants to
I'm
know.
showing an OCT and Bill asked me you asked me to do complications of C or what atherectomy and OCT, and it's hard to have a complication of OCT, so I had to think of what could be a complication of OCT, and I show a case of an OCT where it wasn't flush and it was air. And you see the angiogram and the air go down and the left main closes, the LED closes. I mean, the whole coronary tree shuts down, right? And it turned out I was on the table. It was my angiogram. I wasn't doing it. I was getting it. And I got to tell you, if you ever want to know what it's like to close your left main, I had an anesthesiologist there and my team, and I was awake because when I was doing it, I was trying to tell the people in the room what to do, right?
Yeah, I know who did it,
But
so
we're not going
it's
to say
okay.
who did it.
We're not going to say any of that. We're not
We're
going
not
to say who did it,
we're
but
not
I
gonna
do
say who
know
did
who
it,
did
but
it.
as it's there, my chest is caving in on me, and I have to sit up, and when you have a patient on the table and they say, "I have to sit up," and you say, "No, lay down, you can't lay down." You know? You can't it's like your chest
Wow.
is caving in on you, and I'm looking at the angiogram, seeing I have no coronary flow, so I'm watching it, and I go into VTach, and the nurse is screaming, shock him, knock him out, shock him." It was not a fun day. So anyway, I showed that, and at the end, I basically said, "That happens to me." I was involved in that OCT, not as the getter, but, but your course is great. I love it.
Well, I appreciate it. I'm really having sort of gone down the path of let me show you, let me show you, let me show you. I've decided it doesn't work,
Yeah.
and I think the last couple of years I've really tried to get into sort of this. How do we get compassionate? How do we help people get better? How do we figure out how to get them vulnerable? I mean, that was last year at the complications course. The first 3 hours, like we had people crying in the room, we had faculty crying giving the talks, but it got everybody raw and open,
Yeah.
and that way everybody actually started to learn because everybody leaned in. And I just that to me is the next piece of these events is like everybody sort of goes to them. It's like, oh, I get a free meal, or I get a free this, or I get to hang out with world famous Dr. Shlofmitz and the lazy guy.
Self-mood.
Uh, but I think that's the piece. Is if I was advised, it's like, how do we? I mean, I'll ask you. I mean, how do we bridge the gap to get self reflection part of the culture of the profession? Because it really isn't the culture. I
Yeah.
don't think. I mean, unless you think I'm wrong.
So the first question you had before this was, how do you get the guy in a small town or somewhere who's not, to get to buy in. And that's where in our think tank last year, we didn't just have doctors, we had industry. Because I think industry is our partners. Unlike other areas of
Mm.
medicine, we are really tight, not financially, although some of us are financially tight, but I'm talking about communally tied in terms of moving the needle forward in terms of technology. All the
Yep.
guys I work with, if anything happens as a need, we're talking to them and they're improving things. So we work together. But it's in their interest financially to get every doctor to do what they're doing. So I think it's real, it's hard for we could be there to be the actual vehicles of education, but we need industry to bring the masses that they know in their little communities that each one of them, the capillaries, to bring it to the main, to the aorta, if you will, to get
Right.
them to learn. So we need to be married to industry in that way. We have different goals potentially, but it is a critical part of us teaching the masses.
Yeah, I mean, I always work really hard with the reps because they actually go out and teach. They have more touches with physicians than I'll ever get,
Right.
which is interesting. All right, so we're getting in the back. I want to ask a question. I've been trying to do. Tell me something about you that would surprise me.
Hmm. Something that would surprise I have to think about that. What would
Or do
surprise
I need to or do I need to call Linda and ask her?
you? Yeah. Hmm. I'm trying to think of something that I could say on air. Um,
I'd like
okay.
to know the tenets of the Seventh Day Intervention.
So here's something that I could tell you is I'm insecure. That my wife always says to me, "Why are you such a psychopath that you have to push everything to the limit? You go to extremes." So if you self-reflect and say to yourself, why do you go to extremes? What is it that drives you to go to extremes? I could stop doing what I'm doing just like you right now, right? I could just hang it up,
Mhm.
just go on my boat with my wife. But what drives me to the extremes? It's, I guess, from my childhood, the insecurity and feeling inferior, to everyone around you. I remember a lesson my mom taught me when I was a little kid in the projects, and she would watch out of the sixth floor window. There was a little playground in the morning before we went to school, and all the kids would play punch balls. You have a Pensy Pinky or a Spalding, and you hit the ball, and it's like baseball, but with a punch ball. And all the kids would meet. Every kid would meet down there. Hundreds of kids down, not hundreds, but lots of kids. And everyone would pick sides, and the two best people would pick people, and everyone would get picked. And I never was picked. And my mother would look out the window, and it would kill her. I was never picked. And without telling me, she went to the coolest kid, the best kid, and said, "Could you teach Richie how to play punch ball? I'll pay you 25 cents a week." And without me knowing it. And then this kid picked me and got me in, and eventually I became an athlete. But my mother, who graduated third grade, couldn't bear. So it's the insecurity of being inferior.
What there's a good thing to that for you, right? There's a
Yeah.
motivation to it. So tell people what the good part of that is, and then we're going to talk about what's the downside of that.
Well, the good thing is you don't fail because you push yourself to extremes. So you can be the best of the best. The bad thing is it compromises your personal life.
Right. How that's hard, right?
Yeah, it's a
Yeah.
and if my wife wasn't who she is, I would not have a personal life. Any other wife would have
Yeah.
left. Yeah.
I know. I, it's okay. Linda, I think likes me at times because I'm one of the few people that sort of gives you a little grief. I'm glad you got your boat. I'm glad you guys get out on it more. That's the part.
I gotta tell you,
Using it's critical.
when I dream, if I ever do retire, what I thought I would do is my wife, myself, and my captain, because you're the captain of your boat, but I can't do that. The three of us go out, and I take my phone and I throw it out into the ocean.
You know what my dream is when I retire? I still have one of those old pagers that I'll leave
Yeah.
on at night just because it hit my phone. I'm going to duct tape it to my anchor. and see how long it lasts. That totally resonates with me. Um, we're getting into the last little bit of the discussion. And so usually in the end, I'll turn the mic around. So do you have things that you'd like to ask me or you want to challenge me with?
Well, we've had so many great conversations, and you know, the thing about you is when I see you at a meeting and how there's no bull about you. You go to these meetings and people talk and they're all geniuses and they're, talking about what they do and can't do. And you just say what's on your mind and say, no, 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 you're doing this totally wrong. You want to do it wrong? Go ahead and do it wrong. But this is how you do it. And just do it this way. You're not afraid to be completely open and honest about what you believe in, which is really motivating, and gives others the ability to say, "Hey, I could do that too." So watching you at meetings is always entertaining, but educational, and it really brings out the best in you watching that. You know, on a negative side, I know you've had some, you know, things that have hurt, and I hate to see that you're hurt. And I know I can fix that hurt if you come join me.
we're, we're still talking about it. I'm not there yet. You and I are, I start my part-time this summer and the U continues to sort of not actively help. So we'll see what happens. I've got at least 4 years left in me. And, you know, I, I appreciate that. That's certainly something I'll think about. The meeting thing is funny, right? Everybody's like, you're never going to make it as a poker player. Because even if I'm not talking, like at CTO Plus, I was quiet, but it was like everybody could see on your face, you're
Right.
not happy about what's going on. It's like, nope. Um, yeah, I've always, I guess the meeting thing for me has been funny is I never cared about being famous. I just wanted to help people get better. And I think I'm not a good politician. That's clearly one of my weaknesses of I'm not the most soft person. I've had to work on that to try and not get so many antibodies. But I do, selfishly at times, supposedly I'm really good at CTOs, but the number of people who will not do what I tell them, like, just sort of it's like, really? I, like, I've done it your way. There's a reason I don't, like, I just explained to you why I don't do it your way because I've done it your way. Um, and it is interesting. Again, that's why this whole, for me, it's all the psychology pieces, right? Like what you just said. I mean, I can't wait to have a beer with you some night at the Polo Club or whatever other alcohol you want to have, because I'd like to talk about, when you talk about being insecure, I'm like, oh my God, that's me. I mean, you've seen me give that talk, like that so resonates with me. Of I was never enough, right? And you desperately want to be enough. Um,
Well, one of the
so
things at one of the lectures you talked about that, what's really important at the end of the day, and it's your family. That at
right.
the end of the day, your partners, your hospital, your patients, all that. What matters at the end of the day is your family. So that's something that you take home, and you try not to forget that.
Yeah. So I don't know quite how to ask this question, but I'm going to funnel it a little bit. You are one of the most gracious people I know. You're always, I mean, I know you're great with your staff. You were super gracious to me this summer in Nice by, setting up and then taking care of the dinner for us. I mean, you're a very gracious man. Where does that come from?
My parents.
That's who they were.
My parents were just good people. They had nothing, but they were good people and always made people feel special. And it didn't matter who they were or what, the guy who cleans my floor, I'm the godfather to his kids, and he barely speaks English. But when his kid was having a problem, I sent him back to private school in Ecuador. He came back to the US and was the highest non-commissioned officer, fought in Afghanistan. But, it's like everybody is just as important as the next guy.
And how does that how does that fill your soul? Because it's got to feel good, right? I
It
mean,
feels
that's
great. It makes me feel great to look, it's like so many different people you've helped promote their career, and then you see them and you see where they are. I have guys who, have high school educations, and I got them into industry. They were making 35,000 a year. They were pushing a food cart, and now they're in industry making 5 times the amount of money, happy and change their lives. It makes you feel great. It's like as a parent, when you see your kid succeed and do great, it makes you feel good. All these people I work with that grow and become successful makes me feel good.
yeah. I mean, I think that's one of the things I've taken from you is that compassion and that graciousness to others. That was something I struggled a lot with in my life, and watching you is just, I think if anybody knows you, gets to know you, that's just such a great way
Thank
to
you.
pay it forward to others. So I want to make sure that got out there because
Thank
that's something I really appreciate about you. And I I don't know how we instill that in others other than modeling it like you do, but I think there's a lot of work to be done to get our profession to be more gracious, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Any other questions? Otherwise, I'm probably going to call that.
Well, are you coming to OPCI in June?
What's the dates?
It's May 31st. It's a Friday night. I know you were away, no? You're away?
No, I'm fishing in Mexico.
No.
Buddy and I are doing a fly fishing trip. I'm
Okay.
sorry, man. I would love to be there, but
It's the
you got
dinner.
to,
The dinner this year is
yeah,
gonna be insane.
I'm sure. I mean, you
I'll
got to
show
get
you
me early,
video.
man. My fishing trips are getting in the way of life now, but
Okay.
I'm actually pretty good with it. It's all
Well,
right.
we'll get you back another time. You spent some time out with us here in St. Francis. We'll
I
get you back out.
I would love to come spend a couple of days and harass you guys about some of the stuff we're doing. You gonna come to Complications if I invite you?
It's in August, right?
Yeah, it's the second and third. It's a Friday, Saturday.
I have to talk, yeah, I have to talk to my wife because when I got my boat, the deal was every weekend we have to be out on the boat. But I think
Well,
we'll be on your boat.
but you'll be on my boat. Bring Linda and she gets to
Yeah.
go on my
Okay.
boat. I mean, it's still you're still technically on a boat.
That's what I'm going to tell her.
I think, and if you stick around Sunday, we take the boat home. So we'll do another trip. So you can do the faculty cruise Saturday night, and then we'll do the boat trip on Sunday.
The boat, she'll come.
And,
Thank you.
and I got to get Linda on the podcast next because actually she's probably got more interesting set of stories.
She could definitely tell you some stories.
All right. Hey, Rich, thank you so much for being on
Thanks
the
for
journey to better.
All
For
right.
everybody out there, good luck on your journeys. I hope this was useful to you. Take care.
Take care.